And as and when participants join us, we'll just let them in. So very, very warm welcome. I'll hand you over to Evie. As soon as I've just read out a message with regards to the POPI Act, we are obliged to advise those people that are listening, that will listen, that this webinar is in line with the POPI Act and will be recorded for our Philotimo record-keeping purposes, and will, of course, be shared on all our online platforms. By remaining on the webinar, you give us consent to use your information for statistical purposes. If you don't consent and you don't allow us to record, please leave the webinar immediately. Thank you very much, Evie. Over to you.
Thanks, John. A huge warm welcome for those that are going to be watching us on the YouTube link later on. A little bit of introduction as to who we are. I'm EVY MICHALOPOULOS. I'm the founder and the CEO of the Mahi Philotimo Cancer Project. As John introduced earlier, also co-founder and director on the project. Thank you, John, and heading up our legal department and making sure we're all aware of the POPI Act. Thanks for that. And today we are joined by our partnered institution from Stepping Stone Hospice. We are very blessed to have the CEO, TERSIA Burger, join us today and her team. And TERSIA, we're talking about a topic that sometimes is a little bit difficult for people to just openly talk freely about without feeling a little bit concerned or worried, or a topic that sometimes can cause them depression, because I think they don't quite understand the amazing work that is involved in facilitating hospice services. So today,
Absolutely.
As you've gathered, we are chatting about palliative care, hospice care. And those that are specialists in this field, TERSIA and her team, we are going to be handing over to you, perhaps just for a bit of an introduction, if you wouldn't mind, and such an interesting story as to how this foundation was actually started. So if I can hand over to you, TERSIA, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's really such an honor being on this platform. I think the biggest problem that hospices have to face, other than money, is the myths around hospice care. What we do is we provide palliative care, which starts at the time of diagnosis. And most often, we only encounter our patients in that final stage of their lives. Whereas if they'd been referred to us at the time of diagnosis and they were still receiving active treatment, we could have assisted them so much more. So hospice care is really that end-of-life care. Those are the patients that doctors discharge to us when, one, their medical aids run out, two, when the patient is virtually actively dying. And the patient will come in and die within a day or two or three. We have patients that have been in our care for years. And we assist them with pain control and symptom control. We give them nutritional advice. And we keep consulting with their doctors. And we get to know them. So a lot of people are cured, but many are not cured. So cancer patients make up 90% of our patients. And the other 10% is just the COPDs and renal failures and things. And if we have interaction with a patient over a long period of time, we build up a lot of trust, a lot of, we know the family. We can interact with the family. We do interact with the family. If there's a spiritual need, we can assist in addressing it. Many patients, by the time they get referred to hospice, have used up their life savings, and they really have no finances left. So some of them we assist with food parcels and whatever care. Marika actually did an interview this morning with a young patient in our unit, young. I think she's early 40s, Mariki. 43. 43. Young children, terminal, and she's at hospice because she feels safe. On Saturday, she brushed her teeth, and from the water in her hand, lifting her hand to her mouth, she fractured her arm.
I know.
She didn't fall, nothing, you know, so she's very frail. Her bones are really in a bad way, and she has young children, you know, so we walk with them. Our youngest patient to date was 11. And we will be building a new unit pretty soon. We will have a dedicated children's section, toddlers and babies, where the rooms are big enough for mom and dad to move in with them.
Oh, wow.
And we can keep the families together. So it's a lot more than just nursing. Our patient to nurse ratio is very high because of the frailty of many of our patients. So last month we had 1.8 nurses on duty for every single patient.
Wow.
You know, that's very high. I think in hospitals it must be 1 to plenty.
Yeah.
1 nurse to plenty patients. I think we operate with a multidisciplinary team. So every patient is on a weekly basis discussed with a volunteer doctor. She's an oncologist who is palliatively trained. She is the most phenomenal person I know. And she guides us with all our patients, as a matter of fact. Although we speak to, I mean, if Sunny had an oncologist who was prepared to speak to us, we would speak to them, and if not, then our oncologist will assist us. The team comprises of a doctor, registered palliatively trained professional nurses, and a strong psychosocial team. And I think that is where our greatest value lies, is that psychosocial support that we provide. So every single day of the year, we have a psychosocial person on duty in the inpatient unit. We do have counselors and a social worker who goes out to patients at their homes, because that's a big part of the care that we provide, is home care. And you will know from experience, by the time it gets to end of life, the patients don't want to be in a hospital. They don't want to be separated from their families. So we care for the vast majority of our patients at home.
Yeah.
So please ask me, what is a patient's biggest fear?
Well,
I'll tell you.
I think perhaps, I mean, you touched recently about my mom and the experience that I had with my mom. And of course, this is one of the reasons why I started this project initially, was when I was on those roads, on that journey, I had no idea what palliative care was.
No, absolutely.
You know, and I think the challenge is, you know, when you're on that journey, and especially when the patient or a loved one, in my situation with my mom, she never had any symptoms or severe symptoms, could I say, that were noticeable to say that, you know, she looked sick for such a long time. So you could have expected that maybe something was going to be wrong with her. She was still quite strong. And up until the end, where, you know, she literally just had a bit of constipation, you know, when we took her to hospital, and then only found out that through the process, you know, it's not actually irritable bowel syndrome, but your mom has cancer, and it's quite late, and might not be anything you can do. You're kind of going, wait a minute, like, how can it have already gotten so far? Like, where were the signs? What did we miss?
Yeah.
And then when you go to the hospital, and then they say to you, you know, we've met with a multidisciplinary team, and unfortunately, due to your mom's current state of health and where she is and her cancer markers, you know, we advise that you take your palliative care letter, go home and get her affairs in order. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
What on earth has just happened?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Firstly, what is palliative care? Why on earth, you know, can you not?
Where do I find it?
Yeah, where do I find it? I had not known of what hospice themselves do. I thought it was just sort of another hospital kind of thing. So you find yourself having to now deal with getting this information, being told that there's nothing that you can do for your loved one. And oh, by the way, you know, go and sort it out at home because, you know, she can't stay here. So what I'd like to perhaps share is maybe John's journey, because John also recently lost his mom to lung cancer.
I'm sorry.
And very similar journeys where, you know, was very late diagnosed. And perhaps from John's side, as being more recent, John, you can share what the challenges were having to accept this, you know, and then perhaps we can talk about why people are so reserved in going, you know, the next step of, the minute you mention hospice or palliative care, people kind of withdraw. They fear. So what I want to be able to try and do, and through the project, is to be able to encourage people to not fear the palliative or hospice work, because it actually can give you so much comfort and so much help that can make the days that you spend with your loved ones so much more memorable.
Absolutely.
Than what it is to try and do it on your own. So perhaps, John, your version of your journey.
So perhaps I should start by asking you the question that you wanted us to ask you 5 minutes ago when you said, what is a patient's biggest fear? Perhaps you could answer that for me. I can tell you a little bit about my experience.
Yeah. What we've experienced, it's not death itself. It's how am I going to die? Am I going to suffocate? And your mom would have had those horrible thoughts going through her mind, and that would have been her big fear. We had a young girl of 21, and the night before she died, she asked me to stay with her until she fell asleep. And I sat in the chair in her room, and she turned her head and she said, Tannie, how am I gonna die? And I said, your oxygen levels will get lower because your body won't be able to absorb oxygen anymore. You're going to become very sleepy, and you're going to fall asleep and not wake up. She did use a bad word when she said, how the what do you know? You've never died. But that is the fear that they have, our patients have. How am I going to die?
Yeah.
Was that your mom's biggest fear?
I don't know what her biggest fear was, because she never spoke about it.
Okay.
And I think for me, being on that journey, and now subsequently after her passing, there are a lot of questions, I suppose, that one would have, particularly with regards to, could I have done more? Should I have done more? Was she at peace with her situation at that time? Because even though she knew she had cancer, and she knew that the outlook was not going to be a positive one, because as a family, after having consulted with a very well-known Johannesburg oncologist, and they basically said to us, look, there's nothing that we can do for your mom. And I guess because of my experience with Evie and her mom, and having interacted with palliative care institutions like hospice, etc., I had some understanding of what the involvement would be. But I think for me, the most difficult part about it was when you have a patient, in my example, my mom, who didn't like to talk very much about her situation. So you never really knew what to say or what not to say. And I think for us, the psychosocial element of not only how it affected mom as a patient, but how it affected us as a family.
Yes.
Because you go there, and yes, she's well cared for by a hospice representative. There's no doubt about it. But we don't know whether they should be doing more or we should be doing more. So now it was really about the difficulty of accepting that mom is going to pass. I think that's a hard one. And then secondly, watching her for every minute of every day, watching her breathe or not breathe, watching her pulse. I remember looking at the pulse on her neck, and we had a call from I had a call from my sister. My mom was living with my sister at the time, and she phoned and said, "Come, you need to come. Mom's asking for you." So you go there and you stand there and you physically watch them. You know what I'm talking about, right? And you don't know how long it's going to take. So is she going to go now? Is she going to go just now? And I think for me, that's the most difficult part of, as family, of the hospice journey, watching mom pass without any intervention whatsoever, because that was what had been agreed.
Right. That is very, very sad, that you weren't supported. So I don't want to know on the air which hospice it was, but I would really like to know, because that's the point of psychosocial support. It's to not only guide the patient. So patients they think they're protecting their loved one by not sharing their fears and all their emotions, but they will talk to our team, and all our nurses are also trained. But your hand as a family member should have been held. You should have been told, this is where we are on the journey, this is what is going to happen, and this is what to expect.
Let me interrupt you for a second, Tersia. I just want to make it clear that we were supported as a family, guaranteed. Okay. In fact, I believe that the help that we received from that institution was invaluable and really a blessing for us as a family. There's no doubt about it. But I'm talking about going to the next level. You know, as attorneys, I think we're always problem solving and we're always trying to find solutions. And in this particular instance, I think perhaps I've analyzed it to the extent that, could my journey have been easier? Could my sister's journey, realizing that, and I don't blame anyone, okay, it's just a state of fact. The fact that mom passed in her house, that has an impact. Now that, for example, and I use that as my example for this particular discussion, was not something that was addressed in any real detail. And perhaps now in hindsight, there should have been, not necessarily from hospice's part, perhaps we as family ought to have taken some counseling, I suppose, on that particular aspect. But when a family member passes in that house, it does have an impact on you. There's no doubt about it. Right? You don't want to stay in the house. You don't want to go past the room. Every time you walk in the room, there's a memory. Sometimes it's a good memory. Sometimes it's a bad memory. And do we as family need to have someone to tell us how we should be feeling about that room, as an example?
But you also know how stubborn you are at the time. using my own example. So my daughter didn't have cancer. She had a degenerative bone and tissue disorder, and in the last 10 years of her life, had 81 abdominal surgeries to try and clear up a medical blunder. And she suffered the most horrific death because her pain was out of control. So 9 and 19 years ago, hospice only took cancer and AIDS patients. They didn't take any of the other patients. And I had to fight very hard for her to get accepted into a hospice program. And despite the fact that she was accepted into the program, I wouldn't allow anybody to touch her. I was the only one. I washed her, I dressed her, I fed her, whatever needed to be done, I did. I was a caregiver. And today I know that she needed a mother. She didn't need a caregiver. I was financially in a position to pay for a caregiver. But if I had that back, one, I would put her into an inpatient unit. She died in our house. And it will always be the room where Vicky died. It will never be anything else. That is the room where Vicky died. And I missed so much. The night before she died, I lay next to her and I had my fingers in her neck, just feeling that faint heartbeat. Yeah. And when it's my turn, and I'm at that stage in my life, my family will say goodbye to me at the house. They will take me into a hospice, and there'll be a big sign up on the door that says, no visitors. Nobody will touch me and hold my hand and say it's okay to go. It will be my journey. I don't ever want anybody to go through what we went through as a family with Vicky. And I'm sure that's the way you feel.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you before Evie answers, that is the entire reason why we started this project.
Yeah.
Because of the post-traumatic stress
yes.
go through as a family member without any experience whatsoever, not being in the medical field or anything like that, having absolutely no idea what was going to hit you. And
yeah, absolutely.
And we never ever wanted anybody to go through that again. And that's why we started the project.
And this is why I'm so passionate about hospice. And it's gone way past Stepping Stone. It's hospice as a whole, as an organization, because we have the expertise to make a difference. We have the experience, and if only we could find a way of making people understand that we're not murderers. I mean, many patients will come in and then the family will say, so when are you giving them that injection? What injection? Yeah. That injection. Sure. Wow. And they think we kill patients. Yeah. Patients die because they have cancer or any other disease. Patients die quickly at hospice because they stay in hospitals and they're referred too late. Yeah. If there's one thing I could change, it would be that we'd get earlier referrals from doctors, and we're not seen as a failure stamp on that doctor's report on that patient, because that is what they consider. If a patient's going to die, they have failed the patient. And I'm petrified of what lies ahead of us with COVID now. because exactly what happened to your mothers is we're gonna be hit by a wave of that soon, because patients haven't gone for their diagnostics. They haven't had their biopsies. They have missed treatments because of COVID. And I saw on Sky that it's already started in England, this avalanche of new cancer patients now being diagnosed. Yeah, it's really not.
Yeah. And as you say, it's a reality, and you know, we've been in COVID for over a year and a half now, and you know, when you chat to people and you're still getting the feel of what they're feeling out there in terms of, are they confident enough to go back to hospitals? Because, you know, your first thought, and I mean, again, I can relate to what you've just said, because I've just lost my dad last month to COVID, and you know, the fear of when my dad was at home and we realized that he needed that support from ICU in terms of oxygen and medication and stuff. You know, the first and foremost thought that went into our minds was, before we knew he was tested positive for COVID, was, oh gosh, a hospital now, you know, in the third wave. You want to be around, you know. So when you're saying that the statistics of how many people have missed the appointments or not been able to go for their follow-up treatments or delayed their yearly checkups because, you know, you don't really want to anywhere around medical doctor rooms, stuff like that, it is a reality. And I think, as you said, that's going to be a huge challenge for us to now have to look at forward. That are going to be coming forward.
So I get very frustrated, one, because of late referrals, two, of sheer negligence on the patient side. Because believe me, a patient who's dying will know way before you do she's dying or he's dying. It was 6 weeks before Vicky died, a little bit more, that she said to me, 2 o'clock one morning when I had to give her a breakthrough morphine injection, she said, "Mommy, I'm dying. Promise me you'll open a hospice so that no one will suffer the way I did."
Yeah, wow.
That's amazing.
And I promised her, and it was on the 16th of November, 2 months, and on the 1st of January, we started out of my house.
Sure.
And it was really quite scary because my background is armored vehicles. I mean, I have built and sold armored vehicles in countries like Afghanistan to the United Nations and Yemen and Saudi and all those places. And all of a sudden, I'm in this different world. And it was a huge learning curve. But, you know, Vicky was a bundle of pain. She couldn't breathe from pain. So by the time she died, she was on 800 milligrams of morphine. 800 tablets, 800 milligrams of morphine. But her intestines would spontaneously form fistula, and the tablets would pop into the bag. So I mean, the pain control was horrific. She was treated for chronic pain and not end-of-life pain. And that's a huge difference. Today, I know that she should have been on a slow-release medication. Anyway, when she was examined by a doctor, eventually, and Sue Walter said he is definitely has to come onto the program. And the nurse came in and she put a little driver in. It's got a tiny little needle like this. And in between the second and the third rib over here, they put this needle. And it's the same amount of medication and probably less eventually that goes into the system, but it goes into the system. It's not rejected the way Vic's tablets and stuff were. So Vic went from screaming like a wild animal from pain to driving her sons to school.
Oh, wow.
Watching them play cricket, taking them for milkshakes. So it didn't change the diagnosis. We knew she was dying.
Yeah.
But the last 5.5 months of her life was pain-free and relatively symptom-free. And it was quality of life. And that is what hospice is.
Yeah. And I think, as you mentioned, you've hit the nail on the head when you say it's quality of life. It's we know it's never going to change the diagnostics. You know, and when you were speaking earlier and you said you were a carer and what you would have wanted to change was to be a mother. I had that exact same feeling with my mom because we were her carers, and only because we were just inexperienced, perhaps, you know, we had some funding to get a caregiver during the day, but we couldn't afford 24 hours.
You love them so much.
Yeah.
You think that you're doing the right thing. So don't, you know, survivor guilt is part of the grieving process. So I feel guilty that I wasn't a mother. You feel guilty that maybe you didn't do enough. You feel guilty, John, about maybe you made wrong decisions. That's normal. It's part of the grieving process. But the fact remains, and it's something that we have to remain, know, is we're not doctors. As you say, we're not doctors. We're not, and the information is really poor, coming from the medical fraternity more often than not. And we make the best decisions that we are able to make, and we make it with a pure heart. And I know that I got flu and Vicky sat next to my bed and she was rubbing my hand. And I said, please don't do that. It's irritating. It hurts my skin. And he stopped. And then when I was better, I said to her, so Vic, when I sit next to your bed and I rub your hand for hours on end, doesn't it irritate you? And she said, yes, it does. I said, why don't you tell me? She said, because you need to do it. You know, so they think of us. And that's the difficult thing. And it's very hard. So we have a lot of family interventions where we have to try and get the family and the patient on the same page. I think another thing that we try and do, I just saw Mariki and I remembered, we really try and make last wishes come true. So we've had weddings, we've had christenings, we've had taken patients to the bushveld. We had, oh, I may cry now, a young daddy that came in, and the day they heard that his wife was pregnant, he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And the doctor phoned us and said, just keep him alive. Please just keep him alive until his wife said the baby. And she came in on the Thursday night. She knew she was having the baby the next day. And she had to say her goodbyes to her husband and leave, knowing that she would never see him again. And we Skyped the birth for him.
Oh, wow.
And he saw his son. He wouldn't take morphine that day, and he was in so much pain. And he just went like this and said, "Hello, good." And he died that afternoon, so it's hard, the work that we do is very hard. And I do understand why doctors aren't always honest. The patients hate them for being honest, or they hate them for not telling them enough. But it is what it is, we can only do our best.
And as you say, I mean, the work that you do is really amazing. And when you hear these stories, we relate to some of them because we have some patients that get referred to us, or we lose, like recently we've lost a phyllotomal cancer champion, and we're also going through those emotions of it's so, and I think in a way it comes from the passion that you have, because
absolutely,
so involved in every single referral that comes through, that you want the best that you can. And sometimes you get too emotional, but you just give that support. So what you and your team do and offer, I think is invaluable, because a lot of people don't get to see that. They're always seeing only the negative side of what hospice entails, until they're actually put in the position where they have to reach out, because now they've tried all avenues and everything else has failed, and it's now towards the end. And as you said earlier, we want to change the mindset of not only the patient but the family, to not leave it as a last resort, because as you mentioned earlier, from diagnosis, you can assist. It's not just you only go there because it's the end, or you've tried everything else. Just the emotional support that you offer, I think is.
So we actually have a patient in discharge this morning, who, when she goes for her radiation treatments, she comes into the unit, and we take her for radiation.
Wow.
But she hasn't got anybody to look after her. The hospital's a medical aid, I don't even know if she's got a medical aid, isn't going to pay for that type of stay, So I think a huge majority of our patients still have treatment, even after they registered.
And perhaps on that topic, could you tell us a little bit more, for those that are going to be interested in perhaps making contact with you and your facilities? What is the age limits? What is the cost, perhaps? How many patients could you cater for in your inpatient unit? That'll be quite interesting to know, so that the listeners can also know that.
Okay, so the important thing is there's 103 hospices throughout South Africa.
Okay.
So what I do is not unique. I mean, we do some stuff different, but we all provide palliative care. Our nurses have all had the same training, and we belong to the same, to Hospice South Africa. So we are accredited, which sets us aside from people who claim to do palliative care, but have not had any training. So we have about 150 patients in the community that we look after, and we only have an 8-bed inpatient unit, because they are cared for at home. So patients will come into the inpatient unit for one of 3 reasons. One, respite, so the family can have a break, pain control and symptom control, and then end of life care. So many of our patients die at home but we hold their hand. They know exactly what's happening, how far they are. Often the nurses are with them. And also not all the time, because that is, it's sacred time. And if you're prepared, that is a sacred part of your loved one's journey, that you participate in. I know it sounds wonky, but it really is. Some of the hospices at 40 or 50 beds, we're not funded at all. We battled to get lotto money. Medical aids, some medical aids will pay us. Some medical aids will pay us for the last 7 days of life. And I want you to remember that that patient could have been with us for 4 or 5 years, that we've taken care of that patient. Then there's wonderful medical aids like Discovery, who have an advanced illness benefit and pay for end of life and palliative care. They really are great. Now, they don't send me a check for what I just said. That, but then, you know, the majority of them actually just don't pay. The only charge that is mandatory is a registration fee of 250 Rand. But when we do that, this nurse goes to the patient's house and you can see there is nothing. There's no food, there's nothing. Then we wouldn't ask for that money. And I'm speaking from Stepping Stones side. But if we go, and we have had cases where family members will come in crying and say, you got to help mommy, mommy's dying. We can't afford your care, but we will sell anything and everything we have if you just help us. And then we will look after mommy for 3 weeks. And this is an actual case. And the lady went home and she was fine. And then she crashed at home and they phoned, and one of our nurses went out. And I want you to know that for 3 weeks, we looked after the patient. We supplied the medication because they had no money. We supplied the nappies. And when the nurse got to their house, they actually lived in a 15 million Rand home. Oh, wow. And the 2 cars in the driveway were both over 1 million Rand. So yes, they did get an invoice then. You know, so if you have money, then you must pay. So the medical aid patients really sponsor the non-medical aid patients. But there's been a huge increase in the non-medical aid patients, and people have lost their jobs. They've cancelled medical aids and insurances, and their kids have moved overseas, and things have become very hard in South Africa. And they don't tell the overseas kids, and then they cancel their medical aids so they can eat.
And can I ask minimum or maximum age that a patient can be referred? No limits.
No limits. So we have dedicated children's hospices. Lambana, who's one of your partners. Lynn does phenomenal work with children. There's another children's hospice in Heidelberg, and it's a cradle to grave hospice of severely disabled children. It's run by a German family, and they do the most phenomenal work. Kangaroo. So they've got, I think they've got 49 patients now. And then in Bloemfontein and KZN, there's some children's hospices. So we tend to refer children, but toddlers up, you know, or young, I mean, school-going kids, we look after. So we don't bring them into the unit at Stepping Stone now, because I don't have a sacred space for them to come into where they can be with their family. And I cannot put a 6-year-old child next to a 80 and a 50-year-old and a 40-year-old. They need a very special space. So we had a patient, Mariki, organized. All he wanted to do, he was young, 18, and all he wanted to do was to go to a cricket game. Soccer, sorry. And we actually arranged that they would come to the unit because he was just too weak. He had a compression fracture because of the cancer. But especially the male nurses, every second that they had, they would go into his room, and Mariki organized him what do you call that machine thing, that toy thing?
The PlayStation. Soccer play.
Yeah, PlayStation, and they would go and play soccer on the PlayStation with him.
That's awesome.
So they need technology in their rooms. It needs to be age relevant. You know. So look, the work that we do is incredibly sad. And I often speak at golf days and things because we're so reliant on fundraising. And, you know, when the guys have all had a lacquer day, the whole day, golfing and 19-holing and all of that stuff, they're pretty rowdy by the time I go up to go and give them a sob story. It's not how they feel. And the first thing that I always say is that, newsflash, we're all going to die.
Yeah.
You're not going to escape it. John's not going to escape. I'm not going to escape death. It's how we die. It's not whether we die, it's how we die.
Yeah.
I think another thing that if there's any way you could advocate for that is an advanced living directive.
Yeah.
If John, your mom had an advanced living directive, you would have known what her final wishes were. And I think that when a child turns 18, they should do an advanced living directive, because they could be 18 in 1 hour and they in a horrible car crash, and they could be a vegetable with a brain for the next 20 years, lying in a bed disabled.
You know, from a legal perspective, when we engage with a client and we draft a last will and testament, we always say, you know, do you want a living will? Okay, and DNR, and that's that, finished and clear. How do you want to be buried? And that's it. You don't go into detail about it. And often what we find is a lot of people are very anti having that discussion with us.
Yes, absolutely.
I want to talk about my will. I don't want to talk about it. I'm not interested. You know, I'm not. You know, I don't care. I don't care where you bury me. Throw me in the garden and sprinkle my ashes over. You know. So that becomes,
because they're not going to die.
It becomes difficult for us because it's like, this is like a really serious conversation we want to have. And I think, and I think what's important is, because of our experience with this, it begins to resonate more closely to you. And then you begin to understand the importance of this. Yeah. I think a lot of people have never experienced this before. They pretty much dismiss it as not being that important. It's like anything in life. Once you've experienced it, obviously you take it a bit more seriously, you know. So that's what I think.
No, absolutely. So, you know, Evie, you said that the doctor said, your mom, go home and get your paperwork in order.
Yeah.
My child was 28 when the doctor said, go home and get your paperwork in order.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, they're not taught how to break bad news.
Yeah.
And that is not a way to tell somebody you're dying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's 100%.
We got a big job ahead of us.
But I think you guys are doing amazing, and
thank you.
I know we want to play that little video. So do you want me to share that video? Should we do that? I think
Could we do that?
Yeah.
Because it actually shows what a hospice does.
Yes. Let's see. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. Just tell me if you're able to see the YouTube channel that's going to come up now. Let's see, share. There we go.
There we go. I can see your screen.
Okay, let's press.
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
I think you got to press that button on the bottom. Yeah.
That's it. I just want to make sure.
There we go.
Some say heaven, where patients and families alike are treated with the utmost care and respect. From the moment of registering as a hospice patient and through the difficult stages of understanding, accepting, and closure, our patients and their loved ones are never alone. Our clinical staff ensures that the patient's needs are met, day and night. Whether in their own homes or in our inpatient unit. Our counselling team addresses the family's needs, talking them through fears and uncertainty. An administrative team sees to process and procedures, ensuring detailed information is recorded and communicated to next of kin. For those less fortunate, a fundraising team is hard at work to ensure that funds are raised, but also to ensure that our services can be extended as the demand for palliative care increases on a daily basis. Working hand in hand with the marketing team, news and important information is shared with patients, families, donors, members of the community, and all interested parties. Not only do we jealously guard our level of service to our patients, but also our brand, our credibility, our transparency, and the rights of a donor. Our charity shop is growing from strength to strength, fast becoming an important stream of income. Previously loved items are donated and collected daily from our inpatient unit, and when requested, from the homes of our generous community.
Thank you for your donation, sir.
Thank you very much.
The items, ranging from clothes, furniture, books, glassware, appliances, and sports equipment, is then sold in our charity shop. Behind the scenes, a group of hard-working volunteers give unselfishly of their time, assisting at the various fundraising events, working in our beautiful memorial garden, always available, wherever and whenever they are needed. Our Centre for Palliative Learning not only empowers young people with skills to enter the job market, but also equips them with the skills to reach out to communities desperately in need of quality care. After completing an approximate 80 hours of theoretical training under the guidance of the Centre's principal, the students then complete 300 practical training hours in a simulated environment. On completion, they are placed in a workplace where they are required to complete a further 300 practical training hours before receiving their home-based care assistant NQF2 qualification. We are honoured and privileged to walk this journey with a patient and their family.
But they are fantastic. They give you support, they hold your hand, they cry with you, They do everything for you. And they're fantastic people, honestly.
My father-in-law was brought here the same minute the ambulance brought him. They washed him, they shaved him, and he looked like a different person. And as a family, we were hurting, but we were comfortable because we knew that he was at peace.
We were like a second family to her, basically. She had absolutely no pain. She was just well looked after and well taken care of. We just felt a complete love and ambience and absolute amazing being with you people and the way you looked after her. She, every single day, she said to me, you know, how you guys were with her and how you attended to her when she had a pain, you know, whatever she needed, you guys were here.
My daughter was born with a degenerative bone and tissue disease for which there's no cure, and really had a horrific suffering. And it was her dying wish that I start a hospice because of the benefit that she derived out of hospice care in the last 5.5 months of her life. We started on the 1st of January 2013, and Vicky was our first patient, but also our first death on the 18th of January 2013. People often ask us how we can do the work that we do. And we're able to do it because of the difference that we make. People will come in literally vomiting from pain, and half an hour later, they're having a cup of tea with their family outside. We cannot cure them. We didn't give them cancer. We cannot remove cancer from them. But we can give them pain control, symptom control, and lots of love. I honor my daughter's dying wish every day of my life in the way that we care for our patients.
Sure.
Wow, that was amazing. That's amazing. You guys do unbelievable work, and
Thank you.
it's a privilege to meet you. And being a son of a mom that's just passed away under care, I fully appreciate and respect everything that you do, and I wish you all the very best that God can offer you. Particularly
Thank you very much.
Very difficult time.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was really lovely to see, and you know, by watching that, you can sense and feel the love that you have, and I think that's so important because, you know, it's what makes someone's journey completely different. That little bit of love, that little bit of extra, that little bit of, you know, just that something special is life changing. It really is life changing for those that are left behind. So I just want to perhaps share a little bit of info in terms of those that are listening. I saw you had a charity shop. Do you collect from people? Do we phone you to say that we have items that we'd like to donate? Pre-love?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we do.
That's lovely.
And if it's in another hospices area, we will divert it to them.
Okay.
And the referral process, I must just mention, is the patients have to be referred to us by a doctor.
Okay.
We don't do diagnostics and that type of thing. So the patient has to come with a medical record where we know what the diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment to date has been.
Okay. And I'm also going to share your details on the link that we're going to load the video recording to onto YouTube. I will take the information that's on your website with your contact email, contact telephone number, and physical address. I will also
Thank you.
share, pleasure. I will also share the details on our Philotimo WhatsApp members group, so that those that want to make contact with you, especially, I know a lot of the times we want to do spring cleaning, and spring's coming soon. So perhaps a good reminder for everybody to spring clean, since they've all been at home under COVID. They want to get a lot of stuff out and reshuffle and refix and redesign.
Yeah.
Perhaps those that are wanting to give away their pre-loved goods, please remember to keep Stepping Stones in your thoughts. Don't just give stuff away and not know that they could actually go somewhere that they can really be appreciated. So we'll be sharing that.
Absolutely.
And hopefully when everything calms down, we would love to come and visit you at your home, and come and see what it is that you guys do and share, and be involved as much as we can to get the awareness out there of your amazing institution.
Well, if you don't get to us before, we'll invite you to the opening of our new building, which should be in 2 years. I hope.
No, we won't wait as long as that. Don't you worry.
We'll have to come much sooner than that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a
Thank
pleasure.
you. Thank you
And
for
just a
joining
quick
us.
shout out to our partners, BMW Bryanston, our sponsors for this particular webinar. Again, thank you, ladies. We really appreciate your time, and we hope to meet with you all soon. Go well.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Be safe,
well.
everybody. We'll see
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.